Welcome to another episode of the FreeTAK team video, and we are presenting several features and also approaches that we are using to produce the new version of FreeTAK team or FreeTAKServer, and our new product is going to be called FutureTAKServer. And one of the most interesting things that we are doing is changing the architecture. And by changing the architecture, we are going to have so-called components. So let's discuss about components and why they are good. So first off, if you have seen previous videos, probably you recognize the top of the slide. So, and we have two parts of FutureTAKServer, namely that FutureTAKServer is a digital Pi application. But if you look inside the boxes, you will see that they have the exact components. So digital Pi and FutureTAKServer are composed by services, by core, and then components. Today we are going to discuss what is a component and why it's good for us. So first off, a component is something that is easy to implement. If you have seen the video regarding digital engineering, we plan to generate up to 90% of the code of a component. And the second aspect is that the component has a drop-in capability. That means that you can install and install a component, and that will allow third parties to develop components for FTS. So if you in future you are going to miss features, or for example if you are a organization that need special components that are not released as open source, we can simply develop them, or you can ask any competent developer to develop that for you. And the component is completely abstract from the rest of the application, is almost like a microservice, but is not a complete microservice. The decision for that is that we need to also support having a version of FTS that works on Android, and microservices is incompatible with the Android structure. So what is a component inside the box, if you want? First off, a component is access to a so-called facade. So the facade implement a pattern from the Gang of Four pattern that allow to have a standardized API and abstract from the implementation. And that means that we can query a component and we don't care about its implementation. Potentially that means that a component could be written in any language and could be deployed separately. So the way in which the component communicate with the rest of the system is through a so-called routing. So that means every time that something happens outside of the component, the component will ask for an action, and we have a routing system that will, allocate the responsibility to another component or a part of the FTS core. The component also has a domain system. So FTS is based on a set of concepts that are implemented inside the own server. But if you want to develop a component with some special type of language, you can implement inside the internal domain of the component itself. And then we have also information regarding telemetry and health check. So a component will expose its data like logs and trace, so to facilitate analysis of the component itself, and will also report if it's working. So that will allow us to monitor centrally the health of the system and to identify very, very quick if we have any issue. Finally, one very powerful feature of each component is a so-called business rule engine the business rule engine allows to describe business logic of the component separately. And that means that we have not a hard-coded version of rules. We can deploy those rules in a almost human readable language. Think about a JSON file. And in another video, we will demonstrate with the so-called smart energy a example of what you can do using the domain system of FTS and a business rule engine to evaluate the status of a certain information. So that is the summary of our component architecture. We believe is going to be easy to implement and will allow us to facilitate any type of requirement, not only present but also future for a tax server. Thank you for your attention, and please watch the other videos in the series to see even more exciting things that we are planning for FTS 2X.